Hello again, Ice and Fire Miniatures Wargamers. Kovacs here, coming to talk to you more about Milestone Campaign League. In this video, I'm going to be going through the Milestone Campaign League core rules. This is version 0.3. This is the version that the test group is using right now. We've just completed month 1 of our campaign. There have been a number of minor changes and tweaks that we are preparing to update for the version 1.0 release coming later this year. So page 1 is just talking about the influences and the design and intent. Most of my first video covered that, but cannot continue this without, as always, giving a shout out to Shane over at Boardman Gaming for all his influence especially, and also Edgelord over on the Discord for introducing me to Grognard's campaign system. Getting to the overview here, the Milestone Campaign League system is played on a map of Westeros, labeling 68 regions, each with labeled developments and castles across 11 realms. So just to give you an idea of what that looks like, here is the map that is also in the Google Drive. As you can see, it's hand-drawn. It's got big text for all the regional names and small text for the development names, which end up functioning like little upgrades for each of the regions. These dashed areas are impassable terrain, and there's also a number of sea regions that are delineated by these dashed lines here. One of our goals moving forward and hopes for version 1.0 is to get a fully digitized version of this map that would hopefully be integrated into app support for the Milestone campaign system that will take a lot of the back-end calculations and documentation and make it a lot easier to use. So basically the game is broken up into 3 phases: council phase, challenge phase, and battle phase. When you are getting players together for the Milestone Campaign League, you want to make sure that you have all of the base game 10 factions covered. So that's everything except neutrals. Neutrals are not played as an independent faction in the Milestone campaign system. You can have more than 1 player per faction, but if that's the case, then you as the tournament organizer with your referees need to make sure that 1 player is designated the faction leader for each of the 10 factions. In terms of commitment from your players, you're going to need to get the commitment that at least 1 representative from each faction, whether that be the faction leader or somebody else playing that faction, is able to go to these once per month events that are going to contain the council and challenge phases. The council phase is a background planning and diplomatic phase where you're setting up and managing everything about the back end of your faction. The challenge phase is where you are putting out your commanders on that big campaign map and determining where geographically the battles are going to be played throughout the month and who your opponents will be. And then the battle phase is the rest of the month. So that's a weeks-long period, however long it's going to take your campaign league to resolve all of the battles that were determined in the challenge phase. One of the great things about this system is that when it comes to the battle phase, only the involved players need to be present, and they're going to play those battles out. They're going to end up working with a referee to log the results of those battles. And then at the end of the month, everyone will get back together for the start of the next month and go through council and challenge phase again, except now the land of Westeros will be updated with the results of all the battles that happened during battle phase. Also, this is important in terms of player commitment. Each faction is going to have up to 2 challenge battles per month that are must play. So these mean that your faction is essentially committing to play those battles, and there's major ramifications on the map in terms of moving borders and stuff like that that will happen if they fail to play those battles. There's also a number of skirmish battles that take place that are optional battles. These are battles that your faction can play in order to get a little bit of an edge, but they don't move borders on the map and have far lesser consequences if you miss them, or if you choose that it's not in the best interest of your faction to even play them. One of the reasons that the Milestone Campaign League was developed this way is that it prevents any faction from getting way ahead just because the players in that faction happen to have a lot more free time during the month to play a lot more battles. This system sort of puts a ceiling on that so that even the factions who only have enough time to play 1 or 2 ice and fire battles per month are still making equivalent gains as all the other factions. Each of the 10 base game factions get a 1-page unique sheet for their faction called a strategy sheet that has a bunch of special rules and mechanics that get the players involved in that faction to really use the flavor of their faction in order to win. There is also one additional strategy sheet, that's the Iron Throne strategy, that is only available to whichever player happens to be controlling the Red Keep development at any given time. And we'll get into details of all the awesome stuff that lets you do a little bit later on. So campaign organizers, as you get groups together, definitely feel free to have multiple players in the same faction. Just don't forget to designate those faction leaders. And I certainly wouldn't go above 3 players per faction. If you get much beyond that, you will find that players in that faction have diminished participation compared to players in other factions. Okay, let's look at the materials that you need to set up your campaign. You're going to need a D20. That is so that your players can roll for their events when they do their challenges. You're going to need a D8, and that lets your players roll for Veterancy, which are upgrades for single units that survive challenge battles, making them better throughout the course of the campaign. You're going to need a set of the Milestone Campaign League core rules. I would definitely recommend having a hard copy handy whenever your group gets together to help settle disputes. You are also going to want to have a copy of Break the Siege game mode rules by Boardman Gaming. They are right here at his website. I will have a link to this site in the description below. You will be using the awesome rules found here in order to resolve any siege battles that take place in your Milestone campaign. A Sea Battle Overlay is a quick craft that I threw together to make sea battles a little bit more visually appealing and help the players understand what's going on, and I will show you how to make one of those in a later video, but that's totally optional. You're going to need 1 copy of the campaign map that is included on the Google Drive here, and I would recommend that you get that blown up and printed out or projected onto a wall as big as you possibly can. That's going to make it easier for your players to participate during challenge phase. You are going to need the 4 map details sheets included in the PDFs here, and those represent north, south, east, and west areas of Westeros and the details of all of the regions therein. You're going to need the 11 strategy sheets, 1 for each faction sheet as well as the Iron Throne sheet, and then you're going to need 10 strategy sheet logs that you put on the backs of those. You're going to need the 10 character traits sheets that are included here, and you're going to want to put the veteran logs on the back of those. The character trait sheets are unique for each of the 10 factions. You're going to need 1 challenge log sheet if you do it the way I do it with a dry erase marker. Otherwise, you'll need a couple. And then I put the events sheet on the back of that just as a quick reference that I can read off as my players roll their events. Then you're going to need a number of copies of battle log sheets. Just have those around so that your players can help fill them out after their battles so that you can get all of the information logged from those battles. And then, of course, you're going to need all the CMON Ice and Fire game materials in order to play those battles. Okay, we have just a word here on settling disputes, and this section is actually going to be expanded in version 1.0 with some more recommendations about how to set up your referees. But referees should be selected by your group among participants who have read these core rules and all associated materials. Disputes are going to be settled by the primary referee, which is probably going to be you, the tournament organizer, or when involving your faction, if you are playing, then a consensus of the secondary referees. So this is really important just to have names in here that everybody's aware of when they choose to participate in the campaign so that they know who's going to be settling those disputes. Make sure to fill this out before you get your campaign started. You want to pick people who are going to prioritize the fun of the game and everybody having an engaging, interesting, competitive time. Players should understand that CMON rules updates, or as CMON now calls them, seasons, like we are in Season 5 right now, are static until the end of the campaign. Participants should not update their cards or rules mid-campaign. So this is something that you want to have logged. I have it built in here on the version 0.3 that the rule set for this campaign is Season 5, which means that all the participants in my campaign will not upgrade their rules to Season 6 until the end of the campaign. And then you want to log the last released unit confirmed for playing this campaign. So for my campaign, it's the Skyreach Bowman. And that just means that if CMON releases any other units that we can't predict the balance of or how they're going to play, that we just won't include those in battles for our Milestone campaign. We'll wait, check the balance for next season, and then include them. As a league organizer, once you have your referees set, definitely go through the material together and divvy up some of the duties that you'd like to perform to help the function of the league. You're going to need at least one person who is a dedicated scribe, and the key word there is dedicated. There's a lot of stuff that you need to log. Again, we are hoping to get a companion app for the Milestone Campaign League in the future, but at this point the game runs on documentation. So I will just hop over to my Discord to show you real quick how much we're talking about. So here is the Discord channel that my group uses to document our campaign. And you can see we've got a month 1 council phase recap, and that is all the data that needs to be recorded in a council phase. So there's a lot of note taking that needs to be done, and you've got to figure out the best way that works for you to do that, whether that's to record your council phases, whether that's to have one of your referees who is typing or writing and making notes throughout it, because you have to essentially log every single mechanic that gets triggered in order for the campaign to run properly. You can see that I also have the challenge phase recap here, and then I have individual battle recaps along with veteran unit. In a future video, I will be breaking down monthly updates for the test campaign so you can see how some of these things play out in a real campaign. But back to the start of the glossary on page 4 here, we have unit or attachment +1. So this is something that you're going to see all throughout the rules and the strategy sheets, is something like Baratheon Wardens +1 or Jaime Lannister +1. And whenever you see that, that means a bonus to the list size for including that thing. So a Baratheon who includes Baratheon Wardens in their army and has that bonus gains +1. So if their base army size was 40, now their base army size is 41. If they're in a team game, their base army size was 30, now their base army size is 31. Playing the game well will mean finding and utilizing these benefits to the max. It's important to understand that each time you find a written bonus in the rules like this that you want to use, that can be applied to only one unit in your army. However, if you find multiple that apply to the same unit, you can combine those for use on a single unit. So for example, if you have an upgrade that says Baratheon Commanders +1 and an upgrade that says Stannis Baratheon +1, and you use Stannis in your army as the commander, you would get +2 for doing that. However, if you have Baratheon Sentinels +1 and you choose to bring 3 trays of Baratheon Sentinels in your army, you do not get +3 to your army size. You would only get +1 unless otherwise specified. I am going to skip over the rest of the glossary for now, as a lot of the stuff is self-explanatory, or I'll be getting to it on other pages and we'll discuss it then. On page 5, we get to a simple concept that I think will make your campaign run a lot smoother. I know it has for mine, and that is might makes right. Because the Milestone campaign system is very complicated and still in development, it's very likely that either your referees are going to forget a rule or they run into a scenario that is actually a gap in the rules system. In those cases, rather than getting bogged down, they're trying to decide a ruling between two factions. Go with might makes right. Pick the faction that has a higher might rank and rule in favor of that faction. I've got some examples listed here of situations where that may apply. Okay, page 6, we get to really the most complex concept in the game. If your players can grasp this, they should be able to grasp anything else in the game. Named characters, location rules, and travel restrictions. So let's go through it together. Named characters and units are unique, and although they may appear in different forms, for example, Robb Stark the Wolf Lord and Robb Stark the Young Wolf, that's the same guy. As such, once a named character is placed on the board as a commander or takes part in any battles, that version of that commander may not be used again for the remainder of the month, and other versions of that character may only be used in the same realm, one region adjacent to that realm, or one region within range of a friendly dock in that realm for the remainder of the month. At the start of a new month, all characters should be considered to be in the region where they last participated in a battle, or if they did not participate in a battle, the last region where they were placed on the map during challenge phase. It continues on with some weird exceptions to that rule that are pretty rare, and I provide some examples to explain this, but I'm going to go ahead and pull up the map just to help you visualize it. So in my first example, Tyrion Lannister Halfman may be placed on the board as a commander challenging a battle for control of Red Lake. So Red Lake is here. You can see that that is in the Reach realm. If you're not super familiar with the geography of Ice and Fire, you can use the map details page for reference. And again, our future digitized map should make everything a little more clear. Once Commander Tyrion is on the board in Red Lake, when he plays that battle, if he is not injured, captured, or killed during that battle, then Tyrion Lannister, the Giant of Lannister, may be played as an attachment in an army commanded by Jaime Lannister in another challenge battle in Northmarch here, which is also in the Reach. He can appear in both places since they're in the same realm that month. If he is still available after both, meaning he wasn't injured, captured, or killed in Northmarch, then he could appear as Tyrion Lannister the Imp, an NCU supporting an army under the command of Tywin Lannister in a skirmish battle in Golden Tooth, which is up here in the Westerlands. He would be allowed to participate there because this region of the Golden Tooth in the Westerlands is only one region adjacent to the realm of the Reach. It is very important that you get your players to understand the concept of these character movement, location rules, and travel restrictions, because it is an extra thing that they will need to take into consideration every time they're working through their challenge phase and every time they're working on their army compositions for each battle that they participate in. Definitely check back to page 6 if you run into any weird scenarios and wonder how location restrictions work. On to page 7, we've learned about where characters can be and considering all versions of a character as a singular person. Now, how do we do commander deployment, challenges, and skirmishes? So each player is going to begin with all of their available commanders in reserve, meaning off the board, or in months after month 1, in whichever region they were last played on the map. So using our example from before with Tyrion, Tyrion began month 1 in Red Lake, which sort of tied him to the realm of the Reach for that month. However, The last place he participated in a battle was in Golden Tooth, which is in the realm of the Westerlands. So when he starts the next month, he is essentially starting out tied to the realm of the Westerlands. So he'll have to move within that realm or just outside of it. Remove any other versions of those commanders from the map. So there's a number of commanders that have multiple versions. You would take away any except for the version of that commander who participated in the most recent battle. So each player, meaning each faction in this case, has 2 challenges and a number of skirmishes, which are limited only by their number of available commanders per month. Yes, that means that the Baratheons have a lot more commanders to spread around than the Brotherhood without banners, but the mechanics do work to mitigate this. Just hold on. When a player performs a challenge, they will roll that d20 for an event and then place a chosen commander on a region as part of that challenge. If a commander is coming from reserve, meaning off the board, he must start the challenge by moving from a region he owns and then challenge into the target region, except for month 1. Month 1 is an exception where the commanders can simply pop up in any region. This is because it represents the beginning of the conflict. In later months, if a commander was already on the map, he may only move to a region within the same realm in which he began that month, or one region adjacent to that realm. So same rule. Commanders may also move through one friendly dock in that realm to any region within that dock's range. That's the number in parentheses that you can see on the map details page. Hopping back over to the map to give you an example here. Up at Eastwatch by the Sea, if you consult the map details page, you will find that the faction owning that region has Dock 3. Dock 3 means that you can count 3 sea regions and then connect Eastwatch by the Sea to any land region, and it counts as being adjacent. So, counting 3, we'd go Bay of Seals, the Shivering Sea, the Narrow Sea. That means that someone from Eastwatch by the Sea could make it all the way down to Massey's Hook in a single challenge movement. Now, if a commander traverses any region held by another faction or any sea region occupied by an enemy commander, the owner of that region or commander may announce that they are intercepting the commander, halting them there, and initiating a challenge with their own commander against the trespasser. I've got a couple examples listed here to help you understand if there's any questions. And then a brief explanation that after a faction has put forth both of its challenges for the month by initiating, countering, intercepting, or declaring protective challenge, that faction may continue to participate throughout the turn cycle by placing any number of the rest of their available commanders on the board in skirmishes. And now that you have a rough grasp on how named characters move throughout Westeros, it should make a lot more sense once we get down to the challenge phase. I've got some quick notes here on reading the map and explaining what various things mean on the map details sheets. Those will be important for you to study up as you determine where you want to deploy your forces throughout Westeros. Quick note on month 1 special rules. All commanders, except for Targaryens, may be placed anywhere on the map during this council phase. I mentioned this earlier, without normal movement or starting placement rules. Targaryen commanders may only start in sea regions and move on to adjacent land region this month. Also during month 1, challenges and skirmishes may not be made in capitals, the Dreadfort, or Blackwater Rush this month. Defeated commanders may not withdraw into those regions if held by a hostile faction this month. Don't get your hopes up about conquering King's Landing right off the bat. You'll have to wait until at least month 2. I've got a table set up here for month 1 starting Might and Coin that gives you a shortcut to knowing the turn order for month 1. You won't need to worry about this until challenge phase. So the time has come. You've got your players together. They have a rough understanding of how characters work in a Milestone campaign league, and they're all around the table finally sitting down to play their council phase. So how does a council phase work? Well, if it's any month besides month 1, then factions would declare any end of month effects that were triggered during the end of the prior month, but we won't worry about that yet because we're just starting out. So it's month 1. The first thing you're going to do is tally up all the might gained or lost from all effects listed below. And if this is month 1, then I've already done that for you on the previous page, page 8. You can see all the starting might for each faction. Then you're going to tally up all the coin gained from various effects. And then you're going to determine your might ranking by total cumulative might. And that's going to rank all of your factions 1 through 10. 1 being the most mighty faction at the time, which is Targaryens in month 1, and 10 being the least mighty faction at the time, which in month 1 is the Brotherhood without banners. And these 3 terms are really going to be your main incentives moving through the game. Might is supposed to represent your faction's ability to exert military manpower throughout Westeros. Coin is supposed to represent your faction's economic power and ability to trade or coerce people through financial means. And might ranking is supposed to indicate where your faction stacks up in the hierarchy of power throughout Westeros. Once all your players have determined and logged those stats on the back of their strategy sheet log, they're ready to move into the rest of council phase. So players perform the following actions in any order, declaring all relevant actions to the table as they are performed. Ensure that all players have the opportunity to speak, be heard, and react to circumstances as they occur. This is where you, as the Milestone Campaign League organizer and your referees, need to definitely make sure that everybody has an opportunity to participate. In CMON's Ice and Fire, the order of occurrence is very critical and triggers have to happen at the right time. Council phase is very different from that in that it's free-flowing, but it's still important that all players have an opportunity to react to things as they occur. Free-flowing side conversations should be allowed to happen at the table, but anything that actually affects might, coin, strategy sheet effects, or anything like that must be announced to the entire table, and everyone should have the opportunity to react to it. Because coin is a tradable resource that can be passed between players at any time, the various factions will certainly be wheeling and dealing, trying to make alliances and coerce people to fight for them through payments of coin. The exact details of why that coin was passed from one faction to another might not be relevant to all the factions at the table, but anytime coin is actually passed between 2 players, it must be announced to the table. I have found it useful as the organizer to go down this list point by point to make sure that all factions have the opportunity to participate according to their own strategy sheets. However, you may have eager players that jump in and want to perform some function out of order. If that flows naturally, allow them to do it. That's not an issue. These are the things that need to occur. The Iron Throne player, who in month 1 is the Lannisters, is going to negotiate small council seats. We'll go in depth on this in later strategy sheet deep dive videos, but essentially these are characters that grant them special effects. Because the Lannisters hold the Iron Throne, they determine who holds the seats. The Martell player is going to be looking at their strategy sheet and seeing if any of the factions meet criteria for the Prince's intrigues. They'll be announcing those as they occur. The Lannister player has the unique ability to conceal their current total coin. Everyone else's strategy sheet logs are available for public viewing, and everyone should be able to see everyone else's total coin at any time. Because of the Lannister strategy sheet, they get to roll a d6 to represent coin collected from their gold mines, and optionally perform a special effect called Flaunted Wealth. The Lannister faction is also responsible for and must auction off the neutral characters. I will go into detail about how that works on a Lannister deep dive video. The Brotherhood player is going to be looking to declare and facilitate any trials by combat. The Greyjoy player is going to be assigning Iron Fleet captains and structuring all their Iron Fleets. The Stark player is going to be declaring any sacrifices which occurred at the end of the previous month and any retributions which take place at the beginning of the current month. The Free Folk player is going to reveal the current state of the motivation tracks in the Horde United for the month. The Night's Watch player should be making pleas for contributions to the wall to rebuild the abandoned castles there. This is one of the only mechanics in the game that allows might to be transferred between one faction and another, and I will go into depth on that in a Night's Watch deep dive video. The Bolton player will be declaring the current tallies of schemes among the Bolton commanders. The Targaryen player will be declaring the war focus, announcing any regions gained by revealed loyalists. The Baratheon player will be announcing all declared realms and which Baratheon holds the greater claim on the legitimacy track. And finally, all players will choose to recall any commanders, which moves them to reserve, marks them as non-deployable during challenge phase this month. All players can also pay coin to purchase any developments for owned regions. That's 1 coin per development. Developments may not be purchased in any region if any commander is present in that region who opposes the purchase. Once all players have had opportunities to act and react to the things listed here, council phase is officially complete. Your Milestone Campaign League should immediately proceed into Challenge Phase. During Challenge Phase, you're definitely going to want to have that campaign map out. You are also going to want to have your faction leaders bring all of their commander miniatures to the table. In our test group, we also had all faction leaders bring their dice to the table and place D6s on all of the regions that they owned. If the region had an upgraded development, we had the 6 side face up, and if only the region was held with no development, we had 1s face up. This is not necessary, but helps all players, especially those not as familiar with Ice and Fire lore, understand what territory each faction currently holds. Like we touched on before, understand the difference between challenges and skirmishes. Challenges are battles that your faction is essentially committing to play, and if you fail to play those battles throughout the month, there's going to be major negative ramifications. It's going to count as a total defeat for your faction. Your opponents will probably be able to move territory boundaries or get some sort of big win against you. Skirmish battles, however, are more minor battles that are put forth. They still will advance the cause of your faction if you play and win them, but if you don't manage to fit in that battle during the month, your enemies will not be able to exploit that against you in a major way. Each faction must use both of their challenges before they start putting out skirmishes on their turn. As long as they're just allying themselves to other players when it's not their turn, they may put out commanders in skirmishes. So starting with the lowest might rank, month 1 again that's going to be Brotherhood without banners, and ascending to the highest might rank, month 1 Targaryens, each faction takes a turn putting forth 1 challenge and having the option to put forth a skirmish or pass if both of their challenges have been spent. If the faction has not expended 2 challenges, begin the turn by rolling a d20 for an event. Instead of rolling, the lowest might rank player may choose an event. Events can be pretty meaningful, and this feature is somewhat of a catch-up feature for the lowest might rank faction. For a standard challenge, declare a challenge region and move a commander from any owned region to that region. Alternatively, you can declare a protective challenge and declare a commander for that challenge, setting him aside. Protective challenges get logged on the challenge log with your commander under the defender column. It's a great way to make sure that you are able to counter challenge an enemy faction that you suspect is going to end up attacking your territory. However, there is a big risk because the entire challenge phase may complete with no enemy attacking any territory of yours. In that case, you essentially wasted one of your challenges. So that's something you need to consider when making a protective challenge. When you're not making a protective challenge, if a standard challenge region is declared, you need to determine, is this a neutral region or is this a hostile region? If this is a neutral region, any eligible player may spend a challenge to contest the region with priority given to the higher might rank faction. That just means if the highest might rank faction like Targaryen wants to challenge you there, but also the lowest might rank faction like Brotherhood Without Banners wants to challenge you there, Brotherhood Without Banners is out of luck, Targaryen's going to get the counter challenge. Potentially the Targaryens could accept the Brotherhood Without Banners as a teammate, but we'll get to that later. If both players find allies who wish to use skirmishes or challenges to assist them, the battle may be a team battle. If the neutral region is not challenged by a second player, the challenge is refunded to the original faction who was making the challenge, and the commander takes control of the neutral region for the conquest cost, which is -2 might. If this is a hostile region, the owner determines whether to defend it with a commander using a challenge or a skirmish. Both players may find allies who wish to spend skirmishes or challenges to assist them. If a faction uses a skirmish to defend a region against a challenge and later declines to participate in the battle, the attacker conquers the region without paying any might cost, and the skirmishing commander is automatically injured. After all factions have had a turn, the highest might rank faction gets another turn, so back-to-back turns for the Targaryens in month 1, and then the turn order reverses. So you're going from Brotherhood Without Banners up to Targaryen, and then all the way back down to Brotherhood Without Banners, reversing, and so on until none of the factions wish to put out any more commanders. You're going to document all forthcoming battles that manifest here using the challenge log. There's a couple notes here for other circumstances that you'll run into and how to handle them, like how to handle team battles if you have one faction who's got a willing ally and the other one doesn't, and then an explanation of skirmishes, vanquishing, and protected withdraw. So as you're listening to this, you might still have questions about why should I skirmish? That is a valid question. Sometimes you shouldn't. But because of a little something called vanquishing, which you can find in the glossary, and is a way to capture an enemy commander by trapping them on the map without actually having to defeat them in battle, each faction leader will have to weigh these scenarios to see if it is worth sending a commander out of reserve and into the field. Moving on to page 11, we've got a list of the events. There's also a single sheet quick reference for these that goes on the back of the challenge log so that they can be quickly read during challenge phase to the whole table. As players roll each event, you're actually going to be checking them off and making sure that those are ineligible to be rolled again for the rest of that month's particular challenge phase. If you run out of events and some factions still have challenges left, they keep doing their challenges. Challenges work the same way, they just don't get an event. If all the events get used and certain factions still have challenges yet to be put out, they do not roll on the event board anymore. Other than that, challenges continue to work the same way. Obviously, when a new month comes around, all the events are eligible to be rolled again. Now you've made it through challenge phase, you completed your challenge log, your factions start playing these ice and fire battles against each other throughout the month and logging the results. What do the results mean and how do you log them? Well, here's a list of defeat and victory effects going from total defeat up to a draw and then all the way up to a total victory. And then there's this weird one in here, the Pyrrhic victory, that overrides all other victories if the victors only had one combat unit remaining. There is going to be an expanded explanation in version 1.0 of this, but I'll just give you a sneak peek right here. This italicized text under each one gives criteria for earning the specific type of victory or defeat. So for instance, decisive victory, it says a 3 to 4 victory point lead or a victory that's negotiated in round 3 or 4. So what if those things don't match? What if one team is up by 5 victory points, but it just happens to be in round 3 and both sides are ready to quit playing? In that case, the side that is going to get the victory has to consent to one of these criteria, meaning they have to consent to taking a decisive victory because they either have a 3 to 4 victory point lead or because they are negotiating the resolution of the battle in round 3 or 4. If the faction or factions who are taking the defeat don't consent to that, well, then they either keep fighting or the referee calls the battle to a close with the victory condition met by the victor. As you can see, all of the victories generate an amount of might. Draws and close defeats also generate little bits of might. When you continue down to page 14, you can see special effects called challenge results that you can spend that might on to move the map. So for offensive victories, meaning the attackers won, now if both sides of a battle are fighting over a neutral region, then both are considered attackers. They've got two options. They can either sack or conquer. Sacking costs -1 might off of however much they earn from their victory. But in exchange, they get to destroy the development in the battle region, if present, and gain +2 coin. They can also conquer, which costs 2 might, in which case the commander takes control of that region, including any purchased developments. So that's how you flip a region from one faction to another. Now, if a defending army happens to win a victory, they can choose to either secure or rout with their might. Securing costs 1 might and immediately adds a development to the region or gains +2 coin if the region is already developed. On the other hand, they can pay 2 might to rout, which immediately takes control of an adjacent region from which the attacking commander challenged if reachable, connected by passable land. So you're not able to route through a sea region using a dock. And there are a few other restrictions to routing. Now, you may have noticed back here on the defeat and victory effects page, sometimes characters are able to be captured. What does that mean? Well, factions may win their captured character freedom back by winning a battle as an attacker against the faction holding the captive. The victorious player may rescue one captured character on a victory. If the player holding the captive has more than one captive of that faction, the player holding the captives chooses which character was rescued. Now, during council phase, if the factions have not been able to come to an agreement for release of a captive, the player whose character is held by another faction may opt to declare a prisoner escape roll on a d6. On a 1, the character who attempted escape is unavoidably killed by their captors. On a 2 through 5, the character remains in captivity and may not make another prisoner escape roll until after they've been returned to their faction. And on a 6, the character escapes captivity and returns to their faction. Note here on Regicide, the death of the king or queen of the 7 kingdoms, which gives a huge gain of +20 might to the faction or factions who contributed to the death of that character. On page 15, we get to the different battle types that may be used to resolve battles during battle phase. So you're going to use the map detail sheets to determine the battle type and if the battle area has altered dimensions. You'll find a number of regions on the battle sheet are compressed in one way or another to either be sort of mountain pass scenarios that are only 2 feet wide instead of the normal 4, or sort of beach landing scenarios where the battlefield is only 2 feet deep instead of the normal 4 feet deep. Obviously, these make huge impacts for what types of armies are effective on those battlefields. There's a note in here about army sizes. Although participants may negotiate and play any base army sizes agreed upon with the approval of a referee, default army sizes for a 1v1 battle are 40 points plus list size bonuses. Default army sizes for a team battle are 30 points plus list size bonuses. It should be noted that increasing the base army size will inhibit play on compressed maps, and decreasing the base army size will proportionally magnify the impact of list size bonuses. The game was developed with 40 and 30 points in mind for balance reasons, so just keep that in mind if your referees decide to allow smaller or bigger games. For the purposes of this campaign, there is no maximum amount of victory points that may be earned to automatically end a battle. Battles only end at the end of round 6 or by negotiation by the participants prior to that point. So with all that in mind, there's basically 3 types of battles. There's field battles, break the siege, and battles. Field battles are going to happen any time that there's no castle present or relevant, or the player with access to a castle in that region declines to use it, and you are not in a sea region. You're going to use break the siege rules, those are the rules from Boardman Gaming, to conduct any siege battles. Those occur when one of the players has access to a castle in the region or development and elects to use it for the battle. When using break the siege, players are also allowed to use any of the siege units that are explained in the break the siege rules. Now, why might a faction who has access to a castle choose to do a field battle versus break the siege? Well, 2 reasons. They could be more comfortable with the base game type than with break the siege. A second reason would be that when you use break the siege, the defender has to spend a certain amount of list size points on castle walls. If a faction has a lot of list size bonuses or veteran units that they want to use, they may not be willing to give up that amount of army list size in order to just have castle walls, in which case they would elect for a field battle instead of a siege. Rules for sea battles are here as well. This is for any battle that takes place in a sea region. Watch out, the Greyjoys are probably going to have an edge on you there. These rules use a map from Assault on the Targaryen Fleet by Shane over at Boardman Gaming. Thank you very much, Shane. And having played a few myself, they are super fun. But just like siege battles or battles on a compressed map, you really have to rethink your army composition for playing in such an unusual setting. So when your players sit down to assemble their army lists, how do they know how big their armies can be? Well, here is of every way that they can boost their army size. The first thing that they need to check is the might rank bonus. In a 1v1, the higher might rank faction adds the difference of their might rank and their opponent's might rank. If the Targaryens at might rank 1 happen to face off in a 1v1 versus the Night's Watch at might rank 9 in month 1, big ouch for the Night's Watch. The Targaryens are going to get a +8 might rank bonus. In team battles, add the might ranks of teammates together before finding the difference. This bonus may be split between the team, and if so, does not count towards the point sharing restriction below. Next, you need to add any region or development perks. You will see these on the map details page and only apply to unit types used in that region. Next, you're going to need to look at your strategy sheet and see what bonuses are applicable from there. And finally, you can straight up boost your army size up to +3 by using coin at the following values. Spending 2 coin gets you +1, 4 coin gets you +2, 6 coin gets you +3. Now let's say you build your list up and you end up with a few points left over or needing a few points. Well, you may transfer up to +2 list size bonus between you and your ally, but you may not fall below the base army size. So by default, the team game base army size is 30. You can't go down to 28 just to give your teammate 2 more. There's a note here about ways to cancel list size bonuses on your opponents and how to appropriately do that. For those of you used to the 2-list format, here's how Milestone Campaign League approaches that. Opponents may ask to see enemy lists prior to battle. In such cases, 1 or 2 eligible lists must be presented by the requested faction upon request, the secondary list being a decoy list that the faction does not actually play. Players should present their actual lists to the referees at the start of the battle. Here's a list of steps you need to make sure to complete as you go through battle phase. Number 1, you're going to purchase any mercenaries. Mercenaries are non-unique neutral units that you're including in your list. They cost -2 coin for each 8-point neutral unit and -1 coin for any other neutral unit or attachment. No Boltons allowed in version 0.3. We are working on a special rule for version 1.0 that will be able to include them. The referees need to log the final army lists on the battle log used by all involved factions. Then you're going to resolve battles using the appropriate map, battle type, and all special effects applicable. Milestone Campaign League is designed to have pretty minimal impact on the actual CMON rules. So all the nuts and bolts of playing the battles themselves stay pretty much the same. The main differences are tinkering with the list sizes and the map itself. Once that battle is complete or has a negotiated outcome, you're going to document all the outcomes on the battle log. Then you're going to level up and document veterans, which we'll talk about here on the next page. You are going to roll injury saves if any were triggered by special effects, remaining uninjured on a 2+ after modifiers. So this is fairly rare that someone will have an injury save. You'll just look for that term in special effects. By default, characters who are off the board at the end of the battle are automatically injured. They don't get to roll a save to see whether they're injured or not. They just are injured. So for those characters, you are going to need to resolve death saves. Resolve death saves for injured characters who are off the board at the end of the battle, surviving on a 2+ after modifiers. So if a character is off the board at the end of the battle and you roll a 1 on that character's death save, that character is now dead. Meaning all versions of that character are no longer playable for the duration of this campaign. It's a big deal. Now, if they pass their death save, but your opponent is eligible to capture, meaning they had a draw or better victory effect, then you will need to roll capture saves on your injured characters. If applicable, same rules as death and injury saves. If you roll a 1, your character gets captured by one of your opponents. In team games, it's your opponent's choice which faction takes the captor. Now you do have the option to negotiate or ransom any captured prisoners, but only if the capturing faction wishes to do so. Then you're going to declare the challenge results, conquer or sack, little typo there, or route a reserve for defenders. Remember, these are only usable if the winning faction used a challenge on the battle. If they were just skirmishing, they can't take any of these special effects. If the attacker was victorious, you can rescue one captured character from the defender who owned that region. Again, it's the defender's choice of captive. Then you're going to need to determine if any commanders were vanquished. Vanquished, back on the glossary, refers to when a defeated commander does not have an eligible region for withdrawal. Withdraw basically just means retreating on the map to an adjacent region. They are vanquished, immediately rolling a capture save. On failure, they are captured by a hostile faction controlling a region or possessing a commander where the defeated commander withdrew. On success, they become automatically injured. And that's it. You have now resolved and documented your battle. You're just going to repeat that for each challenge and skirmish battle throughout the month until all players have exhausted or declined their battles. Page 17, we're going to talk about Veterancy. So at the conclusion of the battle, all involved factions for which this was a challenge battle may choose one non-unique combat unit which was still on the board at the end of the game. What does non-unique mean? That means anything that there can be more than one of in your army. So you can't do King's Guard, you can't do Eddard's Honor Guard or Bone Lord's Chosen, but anything non-unique is good to go. If that unit contains an attachment, and the attachment may be unique, it must deploy with the same attachment in all future battles. Roll a d8 on the Veterancy effect on the following table, give the unit a unique name, and log it under the faction's veteran units. You should be attaching Veterancy logs to the back of the character trait sheets for each faction. This unit's wounds and campaign map location must now be tracked and maintained after every battle unless it is absent from battle for an entire month, at which point it may be redeployed at full health in any battle. So basically, veteran units become like unique characters. They may also have a unique character within them as an attachment, but that unique character can also be deployed separate from them, no problem. It's just that the veteran unit itself may only ever deploy with the same attachment. So you can see the 8 Veterancy effects here, and you'll notice that they're all once per game. That's meant to keep these units from becoming absolutely super godlike units that can just crush anything in the game, but does give them a significant edge at a single crucial moment in a battle. The Baratheons in our test campaign recently won a battle in Brightwater and had a unit of Champions of the Stag gain Veterancy. The Baratheon player rolled a 5 on the d8 and therefore has this morale boosting effect that they can use once per game. They renamed that Champs unit Champions of the Sun and logged the amount of wounds that it had at the end of the battle. If that unit gets used again in a later battle, it may roll a d8 again and add another Veterancy effect. However, once these units die, just like characters, they're dead and can't come back. Alright, page 18 talks about a principle called Depleted Reserves. Depleted Reserves is just a mechanic that keeps players from fighting battles with the same or very similar armies over the same regions month after month after month. The principle is very simple. Whatever bonuses you harnessed from any source to build your army list in a certain month may not be harnessed to build another army list in the same region the following month. There's further explanation along with some examples to explain that. Finally, page 19 covers rules for the final battle. This is essentially the Super Bowl of your Milestone campaign league. The final battle is fought after the end of month 6 using the system below. It is intended to give a distinct advantage to the Might Leader, but provide one last-ditch opportunity for the Might Challenger to upset the campaign. It is fought between the Might Leader and Might Challenger to determine the final winner of the campaign. So where do these terms come from? Why not just use first place Might rank and second place Might rank? Well, because first, second, heck, maybe even third place Might rank might have all teamed up into some sort of coalition throughout the course of this campaign, in which case nobody wants to see a final battle between those guys. The final 2 factions who will fight in your final battle will be the Might Leader and the highest Might rank faction who is in opposition to that faction. There's rules that explain how to set up that final battle, what battle type you're going to use, and some special conditions that each faction can bring to that battle. Your own version of the Milestone Campaign League might choose not to have a final battle and instead just reward the faction who was Might Leader at the end of 6, but we found that this was a fun, exciting way to put a button on the whole thing and give a faction who had maybe fallen a little bit behind one last-ditch opportunity to flip the script and win the whole thing. Of course, the final battle is also intended to favor the Might Leader. After all, the Might Leader will have played the game masterfully, to earn that title. The Mike Challenger should not come looking for a fair fight. And that's it for the Milestone Campaign League core rules. Thank you for watching.